Welcome back. Day 3. Day 3, we're going to talk about look development and deliverables. During the morning storm, I wrote a PDF. Well, I wrote a document. I don't know if it's been turned into a PDF. It is an explanation of the round trip or the render path. So it's a 2-page document. It should get you on your way to render the work that you've done, and we'll leave that lesson to your reading. It's also in the manual. You can find that all yourself. And these looks live on this machine in the power grade. So they are stored here for you to retrieve at any time and copy and paste the looks if you like. I would call that, sort of a preset or a canned look or a template look, and I'm generally kind of opposed to that. I've never bought plugins. I don't buy canned looks because, frankly, it's all about your own footage. The canned look, the presets never quite work exactly with your photograph. So it's my goal to show you the strategy of how to create the look so you create your own. And there are some very simple ones that go a long way to making an interesting look or a historical look or some sort of contemporary emotional look. So just real quickly to review what I've done with some of these. I have a still image here. So this is a live action shot. An actress performs as Mata Hari. She does dance sequences. And as you can see, it has a very live contemporary camera look, which sort of gets in the way of the narrative. So to serve the narrative, we really ought to do something to kind of bend or alter the look. So I offered a few examples for my client to discuss. When they edited the film, there were lots of hand-painted postcards from Mata Hari. So I thought, well, let's examine a way that we might get something like that hand-painted look. So I began with this, and this node structure, I'll just kind of circle here. This begins with a primary correction. Here, my second node is, in my typical structure, I selected a secondary correction isolating skin tone, because skin tone is usually the predominant color in a shot you want to attend to. Then I introduced a parallel mixer. The parallel mixer mixes two secondary corrections. There is a green secondary. So I sampled the green there and I phased it to blue. I'll cancel what I did there. That's without the green secondary, and that's the green secondary phased into blue. This node here is a slightly desaturated monochromatic base tone. And I'll show you examples of layer mixing on that. The three elements there, again, this is all concatenated downstream. What begins on 1 is passed to 2. What's changed in 2 does not influence what happened in 1. If we turn off all nodes and just turn on the first node, so that's just the primary correction. That's all we're doing on the first node. That is source, and that's a primary correction. The next element was a designated secondary correction. The third node is a second secondary correction. The fourth node is a mixing node. So that is a base node. It is substantially desaturated, and they are put then through a parallel mixer. You find the parallel mixer under nodes, add parallel node, and then that usually starts with 2 node inputs. You can add an additional input. If I had my traditional mouse. Anyway, it's over here. You would add your third input there. Then they are mixed to one output. That output now is passed to two outputs here. So now I'm passing the parallel mixer into a layer mixer. The layer mixer is a bipack of a color layer and a black and white layer, and that will come out to there. So we'll show you how to build these with these images. And then my second view is sort of a hue shift of the first one. Here's the first offer. The second offer phases the colors into other, we made violets out of blues. And the challenge was that this film was shot in only one location with the same fabric pattern on the walls, and we had to do things to obscure the walls and make it look like these were dances in different European cities over the course of her career. So I changed her costume in one of these to work in another sequence. The third one here is now adding, in the layer mixer, I'm adding blur in the black and white node. We'll show you that construction in a moment. The idea is I wanted to show them possibly a glow in the highlight as maybe something that could be interesting, getting sort of a burnished look to skin tones and such. And this one is more of a monochromatic sepia version of that. This we're adding a little more contrast. And I added an effect here. Let's see what effect I put in. I put in a glow from the effects palette. This next sample has, once again, it has a glow and some other things going on there. Combinations of the parallel mixers. I'm probably desaturating in the layer mixer up here. And then the next look, a more subtle version of things. And this is a stronger look that way. And at a certain point, I added film grain. Okay, let's start then by, let's doing some builds and some basic looks. Now, DaVinci Resolve offers you a gallery. And in the gallery, if you go up to Workspace, Gallery, open the gallery, you have a lot of preset looks in there. These are the canned looks. Of these, some are kind of interesting. What's called bleach bypass. I'll show you how to do that yourself in very simple strokes. But explore these on your own. Some of these might actually work for you. Quite popular are certain duotone looks. There's a folder called Cool where it has some grads. There's various desaturated looks, very contemporary. There's the hipster folder. Hipster folder has the duotone. I think that's the most interesting. And cross-dyed is most interesting. But I don't like the preset look, so I do my own. And there's...
These are not LUTs, right? So if you click
they're not
node structure, you can fudge it.
You will get a node structure, and you can manipulate the node structure. And then you actually could maybe get a result. Yeah, you'll see what they do. And let's go ahead and do that. Let's put one on. So on our shot, our Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, let's put in, and the hipster, teal shadows is quite popular. Okay, now it'll respond. So this applies the duotone look to that. I mean, that's, you might find some of these interesting to start with. It gives you a node graph. You can explore what it did. It doesn't label which node's doing what, but it will tell you you've got a parallel mixer in there. So let's put the duotone back on. Yeah, so that uses a parallel mixer, and you can see that it's got, on the front end, you've got a primary node correction available. And they're using a black and white layer on node 2 there, node number 5. The node down here going into the center node input is a secondary of reds. And what they selected here, so they've selected, they're trying to get an orange teal duotone look, but this secondary doesn't have anything sampled. So that's why, learning to do it yourself. But if you put this on yourself, you could take that eyedropper. Let's put the gallery away for now. Anyway, that's there for you to explore, but once you pull in one of theirs and you don't quite see the effect you want, you can change your mind about which duotone, what gets the duotone. And this one, you might make that. Yeah, but you can, then you get into adjusting the parameters of the secondary. Maybe you get what you want. But it's my thought is you should start doing your own. Now, I just popped my template in there. I've got far more nodes than I need, so I'll just delete some of those. I'll start with one node. And you can do a basic primary correction with that. Now, the very simplest look development is desaturate it. Take it down to something very cool. You can adjust hues. You can turn a hue into something more sinister or cool and interesting that way. This is the very, David Fincher did this in his music videos, and then, it was a Rolling Stones music video that had this look, and then suddenly everybody was doing it. So, and it's simply, the colorist in Santa Monica was rushed, and he said, by the director, give me something quick, and they did that, and that's what they bought, and it launched a look for the 1990s. Interesting things you can do is you can desaturate and then boost contrast and get just a hard edge look that way. So you can kind of manipulate things. But one thing I wanted to demonstrate is you have the LUTs. The LUTs are an interesting experiment. Putting in the wrong LUT can be kind of an interesting thing to explore. So this is a TIFF based on a red. So basically what we have here is a conventional 708, is a Rec 709 image now. Let's try Maverick LUTs. Let's put the wrong LUT in. Let's invert the color. Let's have no LUT. Let's have no corrections.
So you basically use a lot on a node that gives you like that inverted weird stuff.
Yeah.
But that is like white is the selected part then, and you can use that as an alpha to manipulate your original footage. Is that possible?
If you export that matte and then yeah, you would have to generate the matte and then bring the matte in. But yes, you can. You could make a composite of that. That could be an interesting look. And how you add mattes and things like that, you would right-click out here. You would add an alpha channel by dragging this way, and then you would attach the matte. You would do it, add matte. You would make that matte and be very careful in labeling it. It has to be the same node as the same name as the clip that you're, but then,
it has to be in one file.
Right, and appended .m. So it's like shot one, the matte is shot one.m or space m.
It doesn't do that automatically.
No, you have to name the matte. Yeah. Oh, and we might as well do an effect here. Once you've added an alpha channel, you have the ability to do a 3D key. Under the qualifier here, you can go to 3D and put your eyedropper on there, and you can start creating a matte from that. You can invert that Obviously, this is probably the wrong. But if you had a green screen, for example, that you by adding the alpha channel, I've got on another timeline here those effects. If we've got a bit more time, I'll show you compositing with effects. Okay, so once again, experiment with LUTs. I found the film LUTs kind of interesting. And they are under 3D LUT, film looks. Let's apply the Fujifilm Daylight 65 look. Kind of contrasty. Let's put no LUT in. Let's try the Kodak, the Eastman one. Kodak D55. These were much more successful on the Oscar documentary footages. Let's go back to Mata Hari Unmolested. What happens to her if we put the Eastman look on? Film look, Kodak, D65. Yeah, I mean, it kind of looks a bit like what a film print would do. Anyway, so one idea is to get in there and explore with LUTs. You know, perhaps a LUT may give you a result that's an interesting deviation. Okay, back to building a look. So no LUT, reset the node. Let's do a layer node mix. This is very popular, is what's called the bleach bypass look. What that means is from the film days where at the lab we would you wanted to keep the silver in either the negative or the positive. So you bypass the bleach tank. The bleach took the silver out of either the negative or the print and left only the dye. And in like reversal or positive prints, that allows more light to pass through a film strip. It was the Charge of the Light Brigade in the 1960s in Britain that launched the first use of the skip bleach look. Very good results were done in Rome at Cinecittà by Enrico Rossi, and they named the process after him. It was called ENR. And then in not the 90s, the early 2000s, a chemist at Deluxe in Hollywood, her name is Beverly Wood, and she has a PhD in chemistry, and Kodak hired her to run the San Francisco Kodak facility in 1990. She's a wonderful Atlanta, Georgia, African-American, just full of life, but a brilliant chemist. And she devised about 20 different versions of skip bleach, and down to this much off the red dye layer, and for a time there we had some interesting photochemical looks, and then so now we in the digital cinema age are trying to emulate those photo processes. So let's bypass the bleach. Using a layer node, add a layer node here. So you've got your primary node here. You see we have our source splits into two noodles, and then they are mixed together at the layer mixer. On the bottom one, I'm going to take all the color out. And on the keyer, look for the key icon here. Adjust the ratio of the key output. That's a 50-50, a 50% color, 50% black and white. Gain is at 1. I like to do like a 25%. So this is the result. This is bypassing it. So that's our source. And now once you've got these two elements, you can experiment with the bottom one. You can add more density to it. Source, result. That to me is more what a BiPAC skip bleach will do. So I'm going to store this as a still in the power grade. And we'll label that BiPAC. Now, building on that, another thing you can do with the BiPAC is diffuse the highlights a little bit. So let's take our gain back to 1 unity, so we're seeing what we're working with. I might select the curve editor and choose to bring up highlights and put more opacity or density to the other areas, the rest of the grayscale. Having the Macbeth chart up there, you can see which zones of the grayscale are being affected. And then turn on the focus tool and then diffuse that. Then go back to your keyer and change your mix-in. So then you've got kind of a diffused highlight BiPAC. Let's call that diffused BiPAC. So we'll store that in the power grades, and you can retrieve that sometime on your own. Change label, diffused BiPAC. And while we're on this, let's do one more thing where we actually bend the curve. Unity on gain. So we've got our curve editor here. Watch when you take the high white, like 255 white, and bend this way. You're counteracting. You can get kind of a nice glow going with this. With a combination of low whites brighter than high whites and defocus, and then mixing through the layer. Through the keyer. So that's a way to achieve glow on, I've done it in certain films where we had to jump back in time, or somebody was remembering an event. And we'd worked on a documentary about the war in Rwanda, and a witness is talking about a time when a village was taken over. So we added the glow to connote memory. It could mean something else. If it's cast with a cool color, it worked in a horror movie we did. If it's cast with a warm color, it worked in a romance feature I worked on. So it depends. It's all about serving the narrative. See if it works with the narrative. I'm storing this, and I'm going to label it Glow Diffused BiPAC. Now, after the layer mixer, you could add another node. You could add a serial node to that. And for the Matahari project, we wanted to kind of devolve or denigrate the lens. So the lenses in 1917 would not have been very sharp. They would have had distortion, and what I thought would emulate that look was using the open effects, and I brought in a box blur. Now, The box blur kind of does this strange blurring from the corners, but if you reduce the amount of it through blending, like this is 0, this is unity, this is unblended. I took it to about 75%. So you can see in the combination of the diffused white that we did over here, this adds yet another kind of lens-like distortion. Everything is stored as stills, and you can experiment with these, see them another time. Now, in reverse engineering this on your own time, there's an icon here. It says FX. It doesn't tell you which one it is, but if you click on the node and then click on Open Effects, it will tell you which effects that is. Now, you cannot put more than one of these open effects on at a time. So if you want to add the next one I'm going to add, you have to add another node. In the Matahari project, the director asked for film grain. The old Final Cut Pro had a plugin or a filter called Add Noise. It was the most beautiful film grain I had seen, and I thought, how do you beat this? And then other nodes, other plugins came from other vendors, and I said nothing matched what Final Cut was doing. I was using DaVinci for a long time, and then somebody told me they need film grain, and said, I'm sorry, I got to render it out and put it back in Final Cut 7. About a year or two ago, they came out with this open effects, and now the film grain in this is really very interesting. Open effects and add film grain. Drag the film grain to the node which you can't see, so take the handle there and drag that over there. Put film grain on that, and it defaults to 16mm overlay. It is a keyer. It's a key that can be affected. I'm going to put on the Super 8 film grain, and you can choose different kinds of film grain. You can go 8mm, you can do 35mm, which is very fine, and you can go with different speeds. That's 35mm 400T. You can pick a 35mm reversal. It's not showing the keys so well, so I'm going to go back to the crunchiest 8mm. And to also make it more obvious, I'm going to increase the opacity. There we go. So that's putting, you can see more of it that way. You can change the texture. You can change the grain size. So if you got that, okay, there we go. That's a look. And I'm going to store that just because it's so goofy.
Cool. Petri dish.
Petri dish.
If we develop the film with boiling water, it will look like that.
Petri dish boiling developer.
Yeah, then it will look like that.
Okay, there it is. You can use that. Okay, we'll turn down the grain size. You can change the grain's strength and offsets, and then there are different ways to overlay it. So it could be a straight overlay, it can be multiplied, it can be soft lit, which is an interesting look. It can be hard lit, super crunchy. I tend to use soft light myself. Yeah, I mean, in other compositing things you've done, that might work. And then we'll turn the color back on. And let's label this in our box of tricks. We'll call this film grade. Let's go back to my template. Under the looks, there's one called cross process. I think it was in Hipster. Cross dye. Yeah, boy, it doesn't want to do that. apply grade. Not bad, kind of interesting. But let's show you how to do it yourself. So let's examine what it did. It did it all on one node. In one node, it did it with the curve editor and the primary. So what it did in primary was it lowered the lift and the gamma and the gain, made it a little darker. And on the curve editor, it put this bend in the curve. Let's use the parallel, let's use a splitter. Under nodes, add a splitter in a combiner node. So voila, you've got 3 different channels there. I think that one's red. So you can get into your curve editor and bend things. I put more green in the shadow on the red channel, and in the highlight I'm putting more warmth in the skin tone. You've got an instant teal-orange duotone look there that the hipsters in advertising have been doing. So quite simply, that works pretty fast. But you've got these other channels too. So here's green channel. Let's take green into this way. And it's kind of working like our RGB mixer worked, except that was kind of clumsy. You bring those bars up. Here you can get some little nuances because you can add more points to it. And now we're getting a weirder cross-process. What is cross-process? It is when you take the film and you put it through wrong bath. You take reversal and you develop it through negative. You take ectochrome and you put it through the negative machine. Or you take the Fuji stock that should go through the Fuji developer and you put it through the Eastman Kodak chemical bath, and then the dyes did not respond appropriately. These accidents happen. The lab's very embarrassed. The director of photography takes the work print back to the office and says, "Wow, do that again." And next thing you know, Oliver Stone is making a movie with all of that look. And an entire lab has to be devoted to doing that process. The Vericolor process, the Fujifilm Vericolor was very popular then. So we still have that blue channel. We could desaturate the blue channel. It's not doing anything. But let's try the curve editor. And what I'm doing there, bending down here, I'm introducing some sort of interesting yellows and the whites and such. Let's label this cross-process. We have created the cross-process look. What if we appended the node graph with the BiPAC one? Go to the BiPAC preset, select Append Node Graph. So it just adds that. It adds to the ladder. So now we've compounded that. Let's really pile it on. Let's put on, let's append the graph with the film grain. So instantly, 3 looks compounded together.
Gary, do you have a preferred method of converting to like a black and white film look?
Yeah, dial all the color out. But black and white, then go into the curve editor and give it a little bend in the curve. Bring the shadow down a little bit and the highlight of the curve up a little bit. And then it'll look more like positive or print rather than negative.
So dial down the color.
Saturation 0 and a little more density in the curve.
So you never use like the channel mixer?
You can. That's a long way around to a short. Although I don't recommend using DaVinci for effects. I think, After Effects is a better product for that. But if you're on short notice, you can do your own green screens. All right, so this was a green screen project. Client is a corporate video I worked on. They gave me a background plate and a green screen. Okay, background plate, foreground plate. You see that I added an alpha channel, but I'll turn that off. My alpha channel is gone. I have a clip here. This clip is a 4444. It has an alpha channel in it, but if it were 422, as that background plate is, I could create an alpha channel. You right-click in the node zone and add alpha output. Before I do that, I'm going to reset the node so you don't see my green screen key. Drag your output, your alpha output there. Now, no compositing is happening yet. Let's make sure I turned on that background. Turn that background plate back on. So we will cut through the green screen using a 3D keyer of the secondary. So here, go to your secondary mode, select 3D keyer, click on green, drag that across, get more green samples, maybe more samples here. Then down here in selection range, invert the key. Once you have the keyer, you could then add an additional node. And in HSL keyer, you could sample that green screen green and clean it up a bit. But let's do it with this one. So on my first node, my 3D keyer, I'm going to adjust clean white and clean black. So clean black is opening up a bit. So it's a keyer. You explore with black clip, white clip, clean black, clean white, change your blur radius, and shrink the radius. Try to get something back from his edges. I'm going to trash these additional keys that I made. Trash. So I'm down to one. Okay, put that back on. And then you have a despill. Despill will get rid of the other greens that you didn't get. I'm canceling my clean white, black white. See if I can form a better key. So despill did better work than my fiddling. You can also generate a matte, as we were talking about before. If you make your own matte, oh, it looks like I did. Here's my external matte. So I added the alpha output, and then I attached add matte. I attached the shot one matte.
You have to load it in the media pool first.
Yeah.
And then you find it if you go to add matte.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you know what's really dumb is if I did one here and I had 300 mattes there, and the scrolling that was miserable, and I couldn't type by spotlight. So I would hope that the structure I've told you here is, you know, the primary grading is the big valve. The secondary is the little valve. And the curve editor is the wrench. And, you know, do it a step at a time and keep the steps isolated. And like you said, bring in the gallery ones, and, you know, that's essentially a starting template, and then reverse engineer it yourself. But there's no harm in stealing. I'm going to steal from some writer who said, that's not plagiarism, writing is theft. Yeah. I think it was T.S. Eliot. All right, maybe he stole it from me. No, bad artists imitate, good artists steal. Yeah, it's a steal. And experiment and have accidents. When things go wrong is your discovery. You know, be the one who invented the hot new mistake. And there are so many ways to go wrong with this application. You may be the one who finds things. Inverting channels, like do that splitter, and then take the curve editor and take the red channel and take the black to white and the white to black. And then the red channel went that way, and then the blue channel went, goof it up. Put the grain on and blow it, and then we got Petri dish. We invented a look in this room today, hooray. When you get something you really like, I want you to email me so I can steal it. Oh, one more thing. It's my name, GaryCoates.net. Under links, there are the telecine one. This is for us dinosaurs. You can get into the heritage of telecine, and there's a whole archive here of subjects going back to the dawn of the internet. Back in the day when I could be Gary Coates at AOL.com and I just kept that for irony for the longest time. But then I had a business advisor say, you really ought to lose that. But anyway, you can go back in the archive here and find a bunch of us who were AOL back in 1992. And there's lots of interesting discussions of the history of cinema and who did what look when. There are other resources here on the film links. Back when there were film labs and such things. You can, the American Cinematographer Society still talks about interesting cinematography work. You might want to consult that website. I think a sound mixer and a colorist are probably the last two trades that remain isolated. We now have hybrid professionals who can do everything. Everybody in this class can do everything. That is the future of filmmaking. You've been great. Thank you. Wonderful students. See you in the movies. Okay. Thank you.